Welcome to the online course Essentials of Youth Policy, organised by the partnership between the European Commission and the Council of Europe in the field of youth.
I think we start the first webinar, which we titled "Why do we need youth policy?" With Dr. Lasse Siurala, who is joining us from Finland. And this is the first webinar part of the MOOC called Essentials of Youth Policy, which is organized by the partnership between European Commission and Council of Europe in the field of youth. My name is Ron, and I am part of the team of instructors of the MOOC. And together with me today on the webinar is as well my colleague Laimonas, who will support me on the background on collecting different questions and comments for the webinar's content. I also see is Mara, the other colleague, but the speaker of the webinar, Dr. Lasse Siurala, will take the floor in a few moments as well. I would like also to introduce Colleen Robin, who will be with us as graphic recorder, trying to visualize Lasse's input as well as our discussion on the real time. And now for the webinar, I think we will have about 40 minutes input by Professor Lasse, and then we will open up the discussion and collect a number of questions that we already received from you in the MOOC platform. But also please use this opportunity during the Lasse's input to pose your questions, your comments, your thoughts regarding the webinar's topic. I would like also to mention that the webinar is being broadcasted live on Facebook, on the Facebook page of Council of Europe and European Commission partnership in the field of youth, and that we will also try to collect questions that will come up from Facebook. Let me also introduce very briefly Lasse. Dr. Lasse Siurala is an associate professor and former director of youth affairs at the city of Helsinki. Siurala has also served as assistant lecturer and associate professor of economic sociology at the Helsinki School in Economics between 1974 and 1994. He was director of youth affairs between 1995 and 2012. And between 1998 and 2001, he served as director of the Youth and Sports Department of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. Without taking more time, I will pass now the floor to Mr. Lasse Siurala for his input, and we will follow all the discussion on the chat and collect questions which will be addressed in the end of Lasse's input. Thank you again for everyone who joined so far, and it's over to you now, Lasse.
Okay, thank you, Ron. And hi, everybody. The first question is, do you hear me? I hope you do.
Yes,
okay.
Hear you well.
Yes, there is a response. Thanks, Nuno. All right. So when I prepared myself for this, I thought I got to prepare these 30 PowerPoints to make myself clear as usual. But then I heard that it's possible that there's somebody drawing my thoughts. And after hearing about and seeing Colin, I thought that, geez, this is the chance of my life to appear in a cartoon. So why wouldn't I take that chance? So I will just talk and Colin will write what I say. That's quite an exciting thing, actually. All right, so youth policy. I will start by shortly trying to explain what I understand by youth policy. Well, you could say that it's about ensuring good life for young people, to be very short. Good life can mean many things. For somebody, it might be that good life means that people have good leisure time activities, good chances to meet other young people in a safe place, a good atmosphere, maybe seeing a youth worker to discuss and whatever. And then we have the youth centers or youth organizations to provide that kind of a happiness for young people. But the young people may also have other concerns in his or her life that could be related to employment, education, health, well-being, housing, whatever. And then we are in youth policy. We need the assistance of people in the other sectors, in other expertise, and we have to somehow cooperate with them. And this builds the basis of youth policy. Okay, this is kind of the administrative setting of youth policy. But I think youth policy also means and refers to any youth projects that reach somehow outside the traditional leisure activities. Let's say a project for safety neighborhoods, building a skate park, an environmental activity, something like that. I think that's about youth policy, because it means you are going beyond leisure time and kind of a and then you are working with others, and then you become a youth policy actor. Well, I think a good today's example is, I don't know if you know, but today Plan International is celebrating its annual Girls Takeover Day. So congratulations for all women in the webinar. This is your chance to take over the world. So this is an interesting project which clearly is related to improving the self-confidence of women. It's also about gender equality. So it's a youth policy theme. And I think that qualifies as youth policy. And actually, if I think of my criteria for youth policy, I've got 4 kind of a criteria for youth policy. I think Girls Takeover Day fits beautifully actually in all of them. Because my first criteria for youth policy would be that it's something that is youth-based. In the Girls Takeover case, the entire idea is based on the wishes and expectations and needs of young girls. So it's clearly youth-based. And secondly, it's youth-based in a sense that the young people are active actors in the entire projects. They are the persons who are acting in this project. Secondly, the second criteria is that the activity has to be planned. And I think, for example, this Girls Takeover Day is very well planned. It needs a lot of planning. It thirdly involves cooperation with other people. And if you think of the places where girls are taking over, it must be a huge amount of other people that plan has been cooperating with. And fourthly, it's kind of a reaches beyond the leisure time. So I think it's got all the qualifications of youth policy as far as I understand it. So in that sense, well, youth policy can mean various things, but the key idea is that it's cooperation, collaboration with other people, other sectors, other professionals. It's planned and it's youth-driven, youth-based, and it reaches beyond leisure. Okay, what kind of levels do we implement youth policies? I think we had to identify 4 levels on which this takes place. First, we have the international level. In the European case, it means European Union, Council of Europe, which all have detailed youth policy texts, youth policy plans and strategies. For example, the European Union is planning at the moment their next youth policy strategy, and it sure includes elements for youth policy. And the same goes for Council of Europe. The second level that we have is the national level. In national level, there are varying practices. In some countries, the government isn't very active on youth issues. In some others, it is very active. In many countries, there are youth laws, legislation on youth, which explain what youth work is, what it does, and it gives a framework for youth policy. So you can read there what youth policy is, and you can follow that framework. Secondly, and not to mention, I think I nearly forgot a Finnish example, which is that in Finland, the government also prepares every 4th year a government youth policy program, which mainly is a guidance for the ministries to cooperate on matters related to youth. But it's also kind of an inspirational framework for the local level. Third, we have the local level, the cities, the municipalities. In there, we have the municipal councils, the city councils, and often, and increasingly so, in the city councils, they come out with priority plans, strategic plans. And often these plans also deal with youth and children. And it's I think relevant to know about that. An interesting thing about kind of a city level youth policy is that there is an interesting law in Finland which says that each city has to have a kind of a compulsory coordination body for youth affairs. That means an integrated youth policy body, which is consisted of the relevant people and directors of the city to provide services for young people. And they had to meet regularly, they had to follow the conditions of young people, they had to coordinate them, they can make initiatives on services projects that would be needed. A very interesting solution, kind of an institutional solution for youth policy. Well, then we have the kind of a grassroots level. We have the city districts, we have the villages, we have the youth center. And also these levels, you can pursue youth policies. You can deal with some kind of a social issue, political problem, something. And then you are in youth policy. And I would say that the youth center can be a youth policy agent if it wants in its own area. That's up to its own profile making. So these are the 4 levels that one has to keep in mind. And I think the interesting thing is that basically there should be lines between these levels. They shouldn't be separate levels, but they should be somehow interconnected. And but the reality, of course, is as we know that if you go to a local youth center, discuss with a youth worker and ask him what does he think about the EU youth strategy and its objectives, he might not know anything about that, or most probably he hadn't even heard about that. If you ask him about the government's youth policy program and what does he feel about the objectives there, you might get the same answer, never heard about that, doesn't concern us. And even if you ask the youth worker about your own city council, what kind of priorities have they that concern you? Or do you think their priorities concern you? It's very probable that youth workers are totally at a loss and saying that they are just doing their work and they are not interested in politics. I think this attitude is something that has to be changed. Because I think it's very important that whatever level you are working in youth work or youth policy, you need to be aware of the policy objectives of all these levels, even the European ones. And this is firstly because if you can link your local work to international objectives, you can more easily get transparency and recognition for your work. Secondly, mostly there are funds linked to these objectives and programs. So you can even find some funds if you are active on that field. So it does pay to be knowledgeable about what's happening in the various levels of youth policies in the world around you. All right, a few words about the problems and prospects of youth work, just very shortly. And one of the problems, general problems of youth policy programs or strategies is that the entire concept of youth policy is very unclear. Different people in different places understand it differently. So there is no shared, clear understanding of what actually youth policy is. So that's something that we need to do about. And secondly, often youth policy programs and priorities, they are felt to be too abstract, so that one has problems to link to them, particularly on the local level. And then, of course, there is the problem how to evaluate something that is very abstract. So that's one of the challenges for developing youth policy, at least in Europe today, to be more clear on the entire concept and to arrive at more concrete, measurable, clear objectives. A second problem that should be identified is that often youth policy programs are poorly managed. And the third problem, which is that overall youth policy plans and strategies has a bad history of success. There are actually not many successful examples of good integrated youth policy plans or strategies. And this also is linked to the problem of poor management. So something on these lines must be done. And well, I do a little kind of a propagation of my own work in the sense that I'm at the moment writing a paper with my colleague Kalala Mabuluki, who is from France, University of Rennes, and we try to define more clearly what integrated youth policy is. We try to introduce what are the key management issues related to a successful youth policy, and that way we try to analyze the failures of the current programs and arrive at some kind of a proposal for better youth policies in the future. So I gave Ron some titles and names, and we'll have the paper out at some point of time. So in a few months, if you Google it, it might pop up from somewhere if you're interested in that. That's just an idea. And if you want to have a look at the concrete kind of problems of the concept of youth policy, then you should consult the partnership publication Needles in the Haystack, which also Ron will disseminate to you. Looking at it, you get a realistic picture of where we go with all this diversity of concepts and ideas. Okay, okay, there are problems, but there are also kind of a good examples of how, in many cases, youth policy has also been successful. I don't have now time to go through these, but I give you two kind of references which you might consult and read more about them. One is that I wrote in the Coyote magazine of the partnership in 2015, an article on a very
good example, successful example from the city of Helsinki on integrated youth policy, which you hopefully find interesting. So please consult that one. And then there is a recent Finnish initiative called One Stop Guidance Centers, which is a grassroots youth policy or integration approach. So if you Google it, you will find literature also in English to get acquainted with this model. All right, now I'd like next to go to my next topic, which is looking at what are the values, principles, and foundations of youth policies. And I would say that there are two kinds of basics behind youth policy. One basics is the values, principles, and foundations of youth work. I won't go into that into any detail, but I just kind of list these things which I think are the values, principles, and foundations of youth work, which I think apply to youth policies. The first thing, of course, is that it's voluntary. Second is that it's experiential. It's not about reading books, sitting in classrooms. It's about doing. Third, it's fun. And fourth, youth work thinks of a young person as an emotional being, not only as a rational being. And this is a very big difference from many others and is important to understand. Then youth work, of course, emphasizes the importance of young people, people's peers, and groups, and the idea that young people like to be together with other young people, discuss with them and spend their time with them. That's part of the youth period, and that should be seen as one of the starting points. Then, of course, we have non-formal learning as one of the basics. I'm not going into that any more detail, but that's our kind of educational approach, important for us. Then important thing is that youth work aims at active citizenship or youth participation, or the term that I would like to use is agency of the young people. So these, there is a final element which I nearly forgot, is that there is a phrase in youth works often used, which is youth as a totality. And this means that the youth work doesn't look at young people from a narrow sectorial perspective, but looks at the young people as a whole, even if it works mainly in the field of leisure. And this idea of youth as a totality automatically leads youth work to be very receptive of the idea of a more comprehensive youth policy. Yes, I think this list of things, they form the heart of youth work, so to say. So, oh well, there Colin has already drawn a beautiful heart of youth work for us. Great, great, thanks. So now there might be people who ask us after throwing them this list that where is this based? Is there scientific support for this list and these values and principles? Here you can say that yes, there is scientific basis on all of this. And then you could come up with the things like youth work stands on or is based on progressive education, John Dewey and others, social pedagogy. Maybe many of you are social pedagogues. Or if you are a social scientist, the kind of a thinking of what we call sociology of agency. They all are good frameworks for youth work. So in that sense, the heart and the basics of youth work have kind of a scientific base, even if not all understand it. As a kind of an academician or researcher, I'm always kind of trying to emphasize and impose also youth researchers or youth workers to become acquainted with this philosophical background of their work. I think every youth worker has to know one progressive educationalist or one social pedagogical author or somebody who's writing about sociology of agency to be able to see their work in a broader perspective. Now, the interesting thing about this list and the heart of youth work is that when you enter into youth policy, into integrated youth policy, and you start to work with other people, maybe other sectors, maybe other professionals, perhaps kind of a differently looking persons like teachers, social workers, cultural workers, health workers, whatever, who seem to come from totally different ways of understanding a human being, then in order to have a fruitful cooperation between them, you need to have something which is called the trust building phase. When you start a youth policy program or integrated youth policy program, which is where you have various partners with it, you had to start it with trust building phase, where you tell the others how you think about young people, their agency, and so on, so that you would get on the same page, so to say, and kind of reach a common framework for the cooperation and collaboration. And I do remember maybe some 5 years ago when I was at the city of Helsinki, when we started a project on children and youth welfare program, which integrated youth services, health services, social services, the education department, and sports and culture. And all the directors of these departments were sitting around the same table, and we were telling about our work and the basis of our work. And I had my share, and I told about this list of the heart of youth work, and particularly mentioned that important for us in youth work is that that the young people that we are working with are active partners in everything that we do, from planning to acting and evaluation. And I remember when some of my colleagues from the other departments kind of woke up and said that, that sounds interesting. We have never thought of that in that way. Maybe we should do that. Now that we are working together, can we do that? But we don't know the methods how to do it. Do you in the youth work know how to do this? And I could say, yes, we know how to do it. And that was one of the best days as a bureaucrat in my life. And that kind of started a cooperation where we as youth work, small sector, could work together, but keeping our heart. All right, I will kind of finish by looking at a few arguments why we should run integrated youth policies. I selected just a few of them, which I think are at the moment pertinent, maybe for us to discuss. 3 things. Well, the first thing is that, as I referred, at least in Europe, there is a strong political support for youth policy and cooperation between youth work and the other sectors, other actors, NGOs, private sector, whatever, to this whole idea of interprofessional collaboration. And it comes very clearly out of the texts of European Union, the Council of Europe. If you read them carefully, the words are there. And they are quite strong words, and they have been put more pronouncedly than before. So my point here is that when we are running our local project, for example, which has a youth policy dimension. We work with other people. Then I think it's important to mention to the stakeholders or the partners in that kind of a youth policy program, whatever it is, that when we are doing this, it is something that our government has adopted, because these resolutions and recommendations, they are adopted by our governments. So our governments are committed to implement the things that they have written on those texts. So back home, we can say that, listen, our government has adopted this and we are implementing this program. So please help us to support this project. So that can open some doors, maybe some funds, whatever. But it's, I think it's important, useful to make use of this strong political support that we have today from Europe, and then also from the government, I assume. Okay, this is one thing. Another thing which I like to discuss is that in youth policy, we collaborate with others. Now, collaboration across sectors and across actors is the most efficient and it's the most innovative way of providing services for young people or for anybody. So, but this is a challenge for particularly public sector, which is very bureaucratized, full of silos, which have their own logics and thinkings. But the change that is happening all the time around us is that the borders between the bureaucracies are kind of tumbling down gradually. And there are more and more people who begin to understand that social problems are complex and there is no single one sector that can alone solve most social problems. They definitely need the help of other sectors to solve it together. And as quick as we can get this message through, that we have a youth issue, it can be a complex social problem, is something that nobody can alone solve. And if people agree on this basic argument, then we start talking, and then we are already very far. But on the other hand, it is very difficult today to tell to big departments like education, health, employment authorities that they couldn't solve their problems alone. But this is that challenge that we had to take and see. And it's in the interest of youth work to make the other sectors understand that we can be helpful for them and help them solve their own problems. And if we get to that, then we are already quite far. Okay, my final point. I realize my final point is a little bit polemic. It's critical. Maybe it's even arrogant. Maybe this is my last webinar here, after somebody hears what I'm saying. Okay. One of the things in youth policy is that it has to have an objective or a content. We have to explain why we are cooperating with other people and what we want to do for the young people, with the young people. What is the content of our youth policy action? And I have a little feeling that in the youth field, we have been little bit of, we have kind of established a box of our own inside which we feel fine, but we are hesitant to get out of the box. And for example, if you look at the youth field priorities, objectives, things like non-formal learning, active citizenship, youth exchange, developing youth worker training, increasing professionalism in youth work, recognizing youth work, We all know these. All who know European youth policies are well acquainted with these phrases. They have been there for the last 30 years, I think. And I mean, they are okay, but the problem is that they are relevant basically inside this little box. But if we want to cooperate with other people, those outside the box, then we have to find out themes, objectives, and strategies that clearly go outside this box. Something that would be of interest to also other sectors to work with. During the last period of EU strategy, the youth field was brought to at least 2 additional kind of priorities or themes, which is improving the employment competencies or employment career of young people, and secondly, helping young people with fewer opportunities, youth at risk. So these 2 things came strongly within the agenda of European youth work together with the EU youth strategy. And all right, youth work is flexible and competent and can do millions of things, and it does have the opportunity and competence to also contribute these problems. But the question is the youth worker, does it have all the necessary competencies to kind of essentially contribute to this issue? The same goes for working with youth at risk. Youth workers are good, but they are not psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, whatever. There might be other people who are doing the same thing, maybe better, and who have more, maybe also people to work for it. So there has been the question, to what extent employment issues are really part of youth work, or to what extent the integration of youth at risk is the task of youth work. Is it something that really responds to the heart of youth work? Or would it be something that belongs rather to employment authorities or the social department and health department and so on? So somehow I have the feeling that youth work have been good on these priorities, but we haven't really broken through. And maybe also it's not sure that the others, the big departments, have seen us as crucial contributors to these issues and problems. So what do I think at this moment that we are drafting new EU, for example, EU youth strategies, and when we are thinking about our youth policy action and programs. So what we should do, we should keep in mind that maybe we have been too long inside our little box, and maybe we should come up with proposals that interests also other people, our potential partners of cooperation, and do something where we also at the same time can keep our heart. So I think we should suggest new themes which are relevant to young people. They are real issues, and themes where the youth work can operate, it can work with without losing their heart, and which at the same time are meaningful to larger audiences. And to stop my presentation, I've got you one example what that kind of theme or objectives for future youth policies could be. How about climate change? If you think of it, it could be something for youth work which could essentially contribute to it, and there would be things to be done which surely is following the heart of youth work. Well, it's just to kind of think about this issue. Okay, I think I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lasse.
Colin,
I think you
thanks for
brought
the
very,
great-
very interesting points, starting from. Yeah, thank you also to Colin for visualizing
Fantastic video.
all the thoughts. So just to get back again, thanks for the points you touched upon quickly, and I think how interesting they were. It shows also the discussion that your input has sparked in the chat here, and also a number of questions that have been posed to you. I personally have a number of questions, but I don't think we have time as well to address them here. What I would like to do is probably I collected the questions and I will try to read them quickly to you one by one, and then you might probably address them quickly. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we received two questions by Nuno Carvalho, who asks, can you explain more precisely the concept of youth as totality?
Sorry,
It seems to me,
can I see them here? Should I?
it seems to me that youth policies are connected. Yes, so basically you need to go to Q&A section.
Okay, I'm here. Okay.
At the button.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm here.
Then you go at answer, you go at answered, and then on top there is a question by Nuno.
Then I don't find Nuno's.
Okay, so did you click answered?
Answered? No.
Yes.
I should answer.
So basically you open the Q&A button box. Yeah, 5 are open, but let's go first to the answered ones.
Okay.
And then you have the first one, Nuno Carvalho.
Yes, now I got it. Yes.
Okay. So Nuno asks, can you explain more precisely the concept of youth as totality? It seems to me that youth policies are connected with different fields, are not youth-based.
Yes, good point. But I think the difference, the main difference is that if a young person goes to the sports department, to a sports club, he's looked at a sportsman, and everybody who is working there, the coach isn't interested in him or her as nothing else but a potential football player or whatever. And the same goes for other sectors as well. But the idea of the person coming to a youth center and meeting a youth worker is that the youth worker is trying to get a kind of a comprehensive picture of the young people's life, and then see how the different sides fit together and what he or the city could do to perhaps help her. So it's a different kind of attitude at the clients. But you are right when you are saying that some of the young people's issues might be connected to those fields that are not particularly, so to say, youth-based or do have the same kind of approach to young people as the youth field has. But I think there we have the challenge. If the other sectors want to efficiently build contact to a young person and work with him, he should be interested how youth work does it.
Thank you, Lasse. And there is also another question by Nuno, who asks, how you define a youth policy actor? Don't you think that the scope has increased? For example, enterprises, media.
Yes, good thinking. I think now that I recall myself speaking, I was speaking as the former director of youth, as a civil servant in a youth sector. But you are quite right that anybody that has to do with the interests and concerns of young people can be a potential policy actor. And that can mean, I mean, not only the youth workers in public sector and the NGOs, people in organizations which work with young people, for young people. It can be a private company, certainly, and the media world, of course. It's kind of a, it can be kind of a responding to youth needs, can be anybody's concern. The question is that when we use the term youth policy, we mostly refer to the idea that there is some cooperation, collaboration with different actors to get the things done. I don't know if you understand that.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple or three more questions to be addressed, and we will do as they arrived. Annette Woolley has asked, has anyone any advice on what action to take when policy works on paper and not in practice? For example, as a volunteer youth leader, I was reprimanded by your NGO for allowing my youth group to become informed, think critically, and take action by creating a better balanced awareness campaign of high-profile public issues. And then there is the whole explanation that Annette brings, and I will just copy-paste on the chat. So would you like to address Lasse?
By the way, where is the answer?
It's on the chat section.
Chat. Okay.
Do you have any advice on what action to take when policy works on paper and not in practice?
Oh yes, yes, I got it. Okay, yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it's of course unfortunate that these things happen, but it very much depends on I think also on the, in this case it's an NGO. So what is the kind of relationship of the NGO to those making decisions? So and I think there are probably many cultural differences to this end, in the sense that in some countries the NGOs are highly appreciated, and then I would say that there would be it would be very difficult for any public funder or decision making to disregard good ideas of NGOs to implement. But then again, it differs. I mean, we just heard that as the Salisbury murders were kind of found out, and there was an organization who found out who the guys were in Russia, then the official Russian request was that when they were asked for clarification of the identity of these possible murders, the official answer was that we are not giving answers that concerns actors which are NGOs. which gives you the idea that there are many kinds of public organizations which have varying respect for NGOs. But I mean, I don't know this case in more detail, so it's very difficult to say. But normally, I mean, based on my experience in the city of Helsinki and working in there, it is that if you have a great idea to do something for the local youth, whether it's an NGO or a public sector, one of the key ideas is to be sure to inform your local politicians of what you are doing, because then you are making your background more safe. So one thing is that if these kind of things tend to happen, then I think you should start from the politicians and kind of pave the way for a positive solution. That's at least something that should be done. I don't know if this helps you. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Lasse. We have other questions that are coming in. So another question that you can find at the Q&A button under the section answer comes from Arita Gola, who asks, you mentioned the trust building phase, but can you tell us more on how to build trust in youth and how to motivate them to participate in such activities, for example, voluntary activities, considering that in Kosovo, youth don't really participate in these projects or work because they don't see any gain from it. They are all focused on activities that give them financial gain mostly. She also specifies that Kosovo of youth who have poor incomes also don't really participate in these projects.
I think this is the area where I lack expertise, and I would be in demand of a lot of insight on how youth work should operate in such conditions. The only answer can be that in order to create enthusiasm in young people to participate in projects and do it, would be that they are kind of a concrete and local enough for them to see the point of that project for themselves. And then maybe, and it can perhaps had to be something smaller before, and then build on some smaller positive experiences that the young people feel that, well, this wasn't changing the world, but we had fun and we did some interesting things, and we could cooperate, and they learned maybe some experience, and then you can kind of build the next project, maybe a more demanding project on this smaller success. That would be my only guess on how to work on that kind of conditions. But really, that's difficult for me.
Thank you. We have another question coming from Christina, who asks, could be the digitalization a topic for youth policies? Artificial intelligence is a good and bad tool at the same time. We create jobs, but we also disrupt jobs. I think the next crisis in EU will be caused by the robotization of work. In my opinion, artificial intelligence affects youth in a bad way more than we accept.
Yes, interesting question. I just returned from last week of youth work conference which discussed the digitalization of youth work. And well, I must send you, Ron, some of the material which you probably can forward it, disseminate over the people interested. Like, for example, the one who made this question. I think the digital world is something that's both full of opportunities and full of challenges. That's absolutely necessary. But I think we can't do away of it. Young people would anyway be in the digital context and use digitalizations the way they want. So the only way is that also youth work becomes digital and finds the ways of working with them through the digital means, for example. So in order to kind of understand what happens in the digital world and what it means that there will be artificial intelligence and robotization and everything, I need the first thing for youth work would be perhaps that young people would be taught to construct little robots to understand what's the logic in behind, and then go on with discussing the kind of a larger opportunities and problems that is linked with this development. So I think the youth work has to turn digital and find ways of working with young people's threats and fears through youth work. And I think that's also gradually happening. But I can completely agree. There are also a lot of other issues, like if you look at the way that particularly totalitarian regimes use electronic surveillance on their citizens, it's totally alarming and worrying development that happens not only in China and India and Russia, but also in many other countries to certain degrees. So there are a lot of, but on the other hand, there are a lot of also potential for digitalization to be used for democracy. But I think it's the task of youth work to also engage in digital literacy training for young people.
Thank you, Lasse. We have, I think, a little bit more time probably for the last question. And I would like to go with the question by Victoria Vanziva. She asks, there is a very big importance in ensuring that there is an active, holistic engagement in youth policy implementation. What would be the best way to sensitize young people in following up on policies that concern their own development? This is an issue in Tanzania.
Oh, you are not giving me easy questions, I must say. This is, I think, one of the key issue and problem for youth work, how to engage young people in youth policy. I think this is not only a problem in Tanzania, it's the problem everywhere, even Finland, which is a so-called developed country with a lot of well-educated, digitally minded, active young people and all that. because there's lots of people who have found other concerns in their life than being active citizens. So my only answer would be that the first thing would be, again, would link to digitalization. We know that young people are in the digital world, so we should try to find ways of how young people could be active citizens through operating in the environment in which they naturally live, which is the digital world. So that's, I think, one of the answers. And there are some good examples of how we can empower young people through the social media to be active. And another thing is, of course, that I think young people are more probably interested in smaller concrete things near their own living place than broad societal questions. And in that sense, it would be interesting to find ways to work with young people in the area where they live and raise their interests in the kind of a management and organization of things in that area. There are some interesting kind of applications of the participatory budgeting, for example, that young people are given the possibility to decide on budgets, let's say, for youth work in the area where they live, including the youth center and other activities. But that must be organized with the youth workers as a process in which the young people become acquainted of the area, of the funding, of the systems that they can be active in. So everything needs organization and I think longer term educational processes. There is no quick answers to these kind of difficult questions.
Thank you very much, Lasse. There are a number of other questions that arrived here on the chat and also on the forum, and I don't think, unfortunately, we have time to address all of them because it would take probably another half an hour or more. However, we will see with the team whether we can put them all together in one document, and maybe we can have Lasse answer them in the forum of the MOOC, probably very briefly. So I think with this, I would like to thank you very much, Lasse, for extremely interesting points that you brought up on the question on youth policy and why youth policy. Why do we need actually youth policy? And I think we have seen also this from a number of questions and doubts and opinions and clash of opinions here on the discussion forum of the webinar. I would like to thank again Colleen, who has done amazing work on visualizing all the discussion and the input of Lasse. A big applause for Colleen. We will try to collect all the materials as well as the graphic drawing recording of Colleen, and we will share with you all together as one package in Canvas.
We hope this video contributed to your learning about youth policy.